make some more. I didn't.
I will just remind you.
Thank you. Bless you. All right, for those of you who haven't gotten the counter proposal yet, it reads the district and CCEA recognize the importance of voting and encourage all employees to exercise their right to vote. As we have discussed, both sides do completely agree that voting is vital in the climate we live in, but this is something that, as you said, both sides recognize the importance of voting and do encourage all of our employees to exercise their right to vote.
We appreciate the counter. It's a step in the right direction. Where would you see this fit in the contract? Is there
No, I don't have a specific spot that I would see that fitting in there.
it's kind of a generalized
Yes,
statement,
I know.
right? So
I want it to be, in all honesty, somewhat conspicuous where our employees do see it in those contracts. But I haven't looked to see exactly where these are the proper place for it. Thank you, Angie.
If you go, they could become Article 6, in the teacher one, Article 6, and it could be a new, I. So we got lobbying, okay. Page 11. Go right under lobbying.
Is that something maybe to be added to the contract? I don't know if our side even wants that. There's a preamble where both sides talk about, school education.
Should go underneath the preamble.
If we're going to stick with something that's, I don't know what that is. That's all we're talking about here.
So the word encourage. Am I correct in presuming that there are a couple ways to read that word, and that I can encourage somebody verbally, we talked about prominently displaying posters, messages to communicate information, help educate our employees about their opportunities for voting, but also that site administrators could encourage employees to exercise their right to vote by being deliberate and not scheduling meetings on election days so that they can exercise the other provisions of the contract that allow them to leave campus to handle personal business on occasion?
But that would be up to the site administrator, as it currently is, wherever they can make the
It's- That's what I'm asking, this still allows that to happen. We're not using the term encourage to exclusively refer only to promoting, communicating. We're also potentially still leaving the window open for administrators who may practice.
Yeah, I'm not looking to limit something that we've been doing in the past, that certain administrators have done, that was already in the contract. This is just, as we said, it's a statement, but it's not stating in here that everyone will be allowed to come in late on an election day if they, I wouldn't need to. But if an administrator has some agreement with someone based on something like that, that would be up to that building administrator, as is already in the contract for the non-contact time.
Okay. Well, that's good for your start. Good start.
Um, As far as the ROTC, we're going to have to table that one. I am in contact Human Resources. There's we have specific contracts with the military as to what their requirements are of ROTC. And I don't want to respond to that without knowing exactly what those are. So on June 4th, when we come back, I'll have that information
Okay.
for you.
Fair enough, and I think that because we have been in communication with these members of our bargaining unit, we've collected some anecdotals regarding what sort of additional responsibilities they've taken on, how the frequency. Perhaps we can compile their feedback into a memo for you and share it with you so that you have that to
That'll
read
work.
and digest.
Thank you.
Okay?
And we do have a counter to the teacher contract, Article 6, Section F. That was in the support contract, it wasn't in the instructional one. And there aren't enough copies of these either, so.
This was for what?
Instructional. Oh. I think that was. Yes. This is from the information for new hires, correct?
Yeah.
Right?
This is C-32.
Right, but
So-
counter for secret language.
We just changed language as of January about the bottom half of your. That was just ratified. anywhere, which is different because they would have to be, go to the president.
So I'm curious if the counter that the district is offering is simply a response to our request for the district's assistance in bridging the gap that's been created by eliminating NTO? Or has the district, since the new language has been put in place, identified anything specifically problematic about what's already bargained in terms of the exit process?
My understanding is just in comments from employees. I'm not in human resources anymore, so I can't speak to that as much as I could have in the past, but comments from employees. But this will also take care of any of those new hires that are hired after new teacher orientation. They come in after that, will new teacher orientation, they will receive association information as well. And as long as, along with ESPs who were not at new teacher orientation.
So I guess when the district suggests that the process for association members to drop membership should be reduced to contact human resources, is that proposal coming about as a result of concerns with the current process?
As I said, yes, we have had employees that have contacted human resources attempting to draw membership. Explain to them that the process is that you contact CCEA. And then the concern is, why can't I just do this? Why can't I just do this? As that was explained to me. Why can't I just contact you? I say human resources because in our district, that's what payroll is. That's
Yes, their agreement to be a membership, to be a member of our organization, there is an agreement with us, not an agreement with the district, correct?
correct.
Okay. So, we haven't, I think, heard concerns about the exit process. We've had individuals who have contacted us and through the proper channels have been dropped within the 30-day allowance. That it takes about that much time to get somebody into an active dues-paying status by the time paperwork is all said and done anyway. So the 30-day exit process is really more procedural and it's very consistent with practice with other unions that I work with.
It also was a request of the district when we were put up, to give them at least 30 days to get that process done. That was the reason that language was put in there last fall. That was ratified in January.
So yes, we appreciate the response, because certainly we felt like in terms of bringing the two contracts congruent with one another regarding the availability of association information at point of hire was a compromise to our conversation around data, which I know is a convoluted conversation at times anyway. I don't know that it was our intent to engage in renegotiating how our membership processes are conducted, but we can take it into consideration and get back to you.
All right.
I can't sign it today.
Okay.
So. And the other proposal between us right now is on the supplements for our school psychologists and the SLPs. And during our caucus, I think generally the conversation, we did take time to look over, what's offered for school psychologists and SLPs in nearby counties. And I'll be the first to admit that when I look at what's being put on the table, we're still not getting near directly comparable, specifically Marion. They pay for school psychologists in Marion is healthy. Let's just say that. But the concern was brought up that we have 10 positions with 1 current vacancy. So in terms of general fill rates, that particular position is almost more successful in terms of its fill rate than other positions in the district. We have a harder time filling some other instructional positions and some other support positions. And a large part of what we have to consider is when this goes before our bargaining units for ratification, do we have the right information and the right justification for the choices that we're putting in front of our members for them to ratify it? And because in our conversations on the team, we still have a couple of questions, and I think some of the team would feel a little more comfortable if we kind of did our own analysis to figure out on that hourly basis, how far are we off the mark with some of our other positions too, so that we're not creating the appearance of disparity. And we understand we're talking about a critical need area, we get that. But we have to answer to all members of the bargaining unit as well. So I can't say that we can move forward with it today, but we will do our best to be prepared by June 4th to have the next step discussion. And where that will help us get closer to what we need.
Thank you for your consideration.
Absolutely.
One thing though about that, and as Ms. Kirby brought up before, with those positions, if someone is sick, they can't put a sub in there.
Correct.
I mean, I know we've already talked about the sub issue, trying to find sub,
Yeah.
but that is one that does become an issue with, we have 10 positions. If one person's out, we've lost 10% of our workforce for that. And as you're aware, the legislation has come out recently when it comes to mental health and become more assertive. I think is a proper word for that. So just keep that in mind when we talk about this. This is a unique position that we cannot fill with a substitute. And if someone is out for personal illness, we have a couple of them have the flu. We've lost 20% of our workforce in that, and that's a huge impact on our students. So just food for thought.
Yes, we absolutely appreciate that. And that was part of our conversation.
Okay.
That's what we did. We were reminding ourselves the whole way of that $112,000
Yeah.
contract and how costly that is, and how critical these services can be. So it's all part of the conversation for
And
sure.
I'm happy to share the information that I have. I just wasn't 100% confident in the accuracy of everything to be able to make it part of a public record,
Okay.
to be honest with you.
Understood.
But that's the information as best as I know it to be. And again, if we hadn't put forth the recruiting efforts that we had and had zero success, it wasn't on my radar as high. At first, I likened it to every other open position that we have. But when our recruiting efforts gain no fruit
Right.
at all, is really why we decided we needed to bring it to your attention.
So making note of the time, and I feel like we tried to start with some relatively easy items, and it did take a little bit of time today to delve into them. Perhaps rather than open another topic today, it would be good for us to make some decisions about how we prioritize our next conversation, so that when we come together, we come with whatever needed research and information, or maybe there are district experts we can invite in to speak on any of those topics. Is that agreeable?
Oh, that sounds good.
You had
Prioritizing.
initially alluded to the likelihood that the district board might be bringing additional concerns and topics. Do you have any that you general sense of any that might be coming that we can start to prepare for?
No, but if there are any that are extensive, I will let you know in advance in order for our meeting to be more productive whenever we get here.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I know that the bulk of the list is ours, so, we do want to make our time as productive as possible. I'm going to suggest that we will come back to what remains on the table between us and revisit that first, but then we'd like to make the next topic of discussion C20 and C21. We think they kind of go hand in hand, have to do with reasonable workloads and the job descriptions. So specific resources you can think of that we can ask the district to help on that day?
Maybe a list of the job description.
It might be good to have access to the job descriptions, and then we can get to them online.
It's very difficult.
It's kind of.
Websites are a little,
It's hard.
convoluted.
I just got to it the other day, but it took a
Yeah, it's a
lot.
lot
I was
of-
trying a lot.
Yeah.
I don't like the new web browser. They're working on it, but we all agree,
Right.
100%.
For the record.
Yeah.
For the record. So,
We've done it before.
right, so that could be helpful. There's a short form we can get to and pull them all down at once rather than navigate.
So you want all of the job descriptions for, no, I mean for all of the bargaining unit?
Yeah.
Yeah, primary,
So you-
primary
all right, so you-
focus is on support.
Well, yeah, the teacher one's pretty, a little bit easier to see.
And then C18 has to do with, it ties back to this, we were talking earlier about how some of these topics are so interconnected, and has to do with continuity of supports for our students, knowing that we have difficulty getting subs, we had some absenteeism issues that we could talk about, we had some sub issues we could talk about, and ultimately, the concern that we want to start with is the impact to the students. So we're talking about concerns for when either our instructional staff or our support staff are pulled for the purpose of sub coverage, and how we go about minimizing the impact to student services.
Or to have problems with teachers, particularly ESC teachers being pulled to substitute even when they have classes of their own.
The perception that they're an extra body in the classroom because that's how they impact student-to-teacher ratios may kind of be facilitating it, being a little easy to pull that support teacher who should be providing services to a student when we're in an emergency situation trying to cover a class. So, that's one that, it's a big rock. I'm just gonna say, we talked today about some things extensively that we brought thinking were gonna be pretty easy moves. That's a pretty big rock. Anybody think of any resources we might need for that conversation would be good. And then, C29, the procedures for monies collected. That might be an easy one. Right, if we have a clearly identified set of procedures already in existence somewhere, how do we develop that consistency in terms of the expectation for how money handling is done? I'll say a lot of our staff get very nervous when they're told they have to deal with other people's money. Few educators came into the field thinking they were going to be cashiers or.
Well, I imagine a lot of the last few years probably got a change as to what they thought they were getting into.
Yeah.
The last year, whenever we implemented Alice, I think some of them, before we implemented Alice, I know Deborah and I had conversations about what was going on in the classroom. And this is different, it's a different world, but yeah, I'll see, I'll get that for you. I can send it to you.
And just because it's a talk about money, it's still liability issue. You're handling money. Maybe contract can afford some protections of some kind.
I'll find out what what that procedure is, and I'll send it to you in advance.
That would be great. And then, something else that we have gotten a lot of feedback from members all across the district in all different positions and areas of assignment, and that's dealing with unfounded accusations and how do we protect not only jobs and the efficacy of the people who are in them when they've been accused of something and perhaps it's become harmful to their reputation. But you know, how do we ensure that when there's truly an unfounded complaint, we've been through the process, it's been investigated, that that individual is protected from unnecessary repercussions. And it's a hard one. That's a hard one to answer because I know that the district does what it has to do. And we had talked about this initially. You had mentioned that if it's reported to DCF, that's a kind of hands-off situation. We understand that when you're talking about an outside agency's involvement, the requirement for mandatory reporting there is an obligation for all of us. We get that. But we can provide you with, I think, some examples of individuals who have found themselves unduly maligned, so to speak, because of unfounded accusations.
Yeah, if you could send me that information, that'd be great, because like I said, I've worked in that for a while. That's why I said the DCF one is clear cut, that one's a bit out of our hands. But if I know the situations you're talking about, it would be much better for me to have a point of reference as to what you're talking about.
Well, there also has to be some kind of consequences, whether it is a student making these unfounded accusations or it is an employee making unfounded accusations. There has to be some kind of consequence to that. You know, you have a student who accuses Rob of hitting them, and he wasn't 10 feet from them, or closer to them. There has to be some kind of consequence. I mean,
I understand where you're coming from with the employee, but as far as the student ones, I don't really know how we can put that in the
there needs to
contract.
be something, no, well, there needs to be something done to these children that make these, get mad because they got a grade or got a discipline, and now they make these accusations against these employees, which puts these employees on a hot seat. I mean, and when the investigation is done, and it is found that that child lied, or that employee lied because of whatever reason, there needs to be some kind of consequence for the person who made the false accusations.
And as I said, with the employee, that's a different story, because they're bound by the principles of professional conduct, which means that whenever they're interviewed, they have to be honest. They lie, that is something. As far as student goes, that would be a code of conduct issue. But I hear what you're saying.
Well, and sometimes contract language can be joined with student code of conduct language. I mean, I'm just saying, we're now in a different realm than when any of us began our jobs. And we're in a realm where people aren't parenting their children, they're not teaching their children to be honest and accept the consequences of their behavior. And it is not proper that employees continue to face these false accusations, which are damaging to their reputations and their esteem. And so yes, maybe there needs to be something put in the code of conduct that students making false accusations against employees will be disciplined. I mean, I don't, you get students who do things, and we have employees urge not to press charges, urge not to go within their rights. And because, think of the child, well, sometimes we have to think of the employees too. And when you have, the students just, all this political correctness is unacceptable when they're not in the right. And to just continue to allow them to skate and do whatever they willy-nilly want to do is not proper protection of your employees. When I first started working in the district, the administration supported their employees in front until they were proven. They may say, did you do this in the back room, but they didn't do it in front of the parents. They thought that their employees were right until they were found wrong. And I'm not saying that employees are imperfect, but it needs to be, the swing needs to be more supportive of the employees and giving the employees the respect that they deserve, and not just because a student says that, to think that that student is 100% honest. And I think that we have employees who feel very strongly that they are not supported by the district because they're being pulled out of the classroom. You're sitting there for, and I understand the mandatory reporting and all this stuff, but if an employee is found innocent, it needs to be something more than go ahead and go back to your job.
And so maybe some of what we can talk about too is what sort of supports are necessary and important when there's been a situation after the fact to ensure that the teacher can return to an effective role, or the support staff can return to an effective role. It's like I said, we put the big rocks off, we were hoping. There's a small bunch of
If you
things.
could give me some information as to those situations that occurred, that'd be great. I might have been involved in some of them, I'm not sure, maybe I have, maybe I won't, but that would be great for me to have that context as to understand exactly what we're talking about.
Okay, and with the understanding that we would never disclose individual
Oh, this-
members'
yeah,
names or identify
No,
them.
I just need to have a general idea as to what occurred,
Absolutely.
and whenever they went back, the feeling that they felt, what they
Sure.
experienced when they went back, because I don't see that whenever they leave our company, so to speak, if they're here as a guest.
So that makes for 5 potential next order items in addition to the ones that are already on the table. I will say that it kind of sounds to me like this C6 may wrap into that conversation we're having about the process of investigations, which I believe was another item on the list. Like I said, I think we have some overlap between some of these items, so maybe tackling more than one at a time.
But this one we're talking about whenever the person was found to have done no wrong, correct?
Correct.
There's nothing is done, you know what I mean?
Correct.
And typically, and Deborah's right, whenever they, if it is a DCF situation, we have called them in and say, oh, you were clear, we're gonna call your principal, and
Right.
let them know, hey, they're on their way, or they'll be in tomorrow, they're all good to go.
Right.
We don't get into any more because that is not, for instance, some people here know that, that is not their business. Person's cleared, they're back to work, solely for that reason. So, but that's typically what we've done, and we don't really go back and necessarily check on them after that to, you know, typically HR starts showing up at a school, it's not always the most fun situation for people, so.
All right, and I have the speaker.
Yeah, for example, like my aide at the very beginning of the school year, we had a problem and she was found innocent. And then when she came back to our classroom, she wasn't allowed to come into our classroom because for fear that the mom of the child wouldn't be happy. But yet, she was completely innocent.
And then the other side of that, I mean, my rights as a teacher or a support, if I've been accused of something and I'm then transitioned back into the exact same environment with the exact same kiddo, you know, if it was a deliberate and intentional falsehood, that I'm gonna feel more at jeopardy going back into that environment. big conversation to have. I realize that there's a lot of
I just
directions.
want to talk about the context.
Yeah.
Thank you, this is kind of what I needed to make sure I understood.
How are you
Because both of
supposed to-
those feelings were happening, like she was scared to come back because of the whole lie that was made up, but then again, she wasn't allowed to come back.
But if you do go back, then you're in a situation, how, about disciplining that child again. I mean, if the child acts out, are they gonna make another accusation?
Pre-K sister was a fourth grader.
And so unfortunately, what we're talking about is one of those fundamental issues that we hear a lot about as the professional association because it directly impacts morale. And when, employees are feeling beaten up or put down or not effectively supported, they're gonna come to us likely first and say, why does nobody have my back? So it has that direct connect to morale. It's something that's really important for our bargaining units. But I realize it's like I said, a big rock.
Yeah.
A really big rock.
Can I ask, real quickly, if you have suggestions on how what would be appropriate? Because what I'm hearing is it's often, how do you prove?
Yeah.
We were able to prove that the person was not a detriment to children when they would go back. And how do you prove that, I'd love to know what our solutions will be for that. Because a high school kid is a different kid.
Yeah.
Than
Pre-K.
or a mother who calls and says, my kid said.
Yes.
Well, I think it's like,
I'm sorry, she was making, you're right after her. Yeah.
What do you do in the case that a kid makes an accusation just out of pure spite because they don't like that teacher or they don't like that support staff or whoever, the administrator? They just make that accusation and they go around and say, I'll just get my mom to call. And we'll get her fired. Don't worry. And then you do it. You hear them and you talk about it. That's, I guess, a lot of what's going on. If you didn't have, like, say, me and her were out there and the kid turns around and says, you did this to me, if it wasn't for her standing there saying, no, she didn't, it's automatically they believe the kid is not the person.
It depends by, what do you mean by they?
Like a student.
No, I mean, if you're talking about the administrator or human resources versus DCF, I can never
No, but
tell
I'm-
you what DCF is gonna take as a call. But,
No, I'm saying as far as what she was saying.
and I know, I mean, if
Discipline,
yeah,
student.
a child comes to an administrator and says, hey, this teacher did this person did that, there's not automatically, in my dealings with it, it's not always an assumption that the teacher did something wrong.
Right.
It's never said, there have been times where I've actually thought, okay, hold it for just a second. Hey, what happened out there? You said this, that's not what happened, so, thank you very much. So, that's my experience with it, but I hear where you guys are coming from with that, so I mean, that's definitely something, as Lynn said, I'd love to hear some suggestions, because,
Well, that's why I was saying as far as the repercussions as a student, that's what I mean, not the administrator. As far as the student making that accusation, knowing that he has the power to do that,
no,
so that that person.
they think they have the power to do
Yes.
that, that's,
Or they would get in trouble.
yeah, but that, again, that's where it comes into a code of conduct issue, but I understand what you're saying on that.
and kind of to piggyback off of that, when a student does make an accusation, and maybe they even end up saying it was to get someone fired, it was completely false or whatever, because that's what they do sometimes. There needs to, I understand the student conduct issue, but there does need to be something, because some of the punishments have been like removing them from the teacher's classroom, but if they hate the teacher, that's like a win for them. So, I don't know what kind of punishment is now on the discipline side, but they are getting this mindset, and I'm seeing it a lot lately, that they do kind of, like, they can try to, go to their parents can come up, say something, even if it's completely untrue, and that they think that they have the power to get teachers in trouble. Maybe not fired, but in trouble.
I know we're trying to wrap,
Yes,
so
yes.
I'll hold it until we meet again.
Yeah. But I will say say in terms of resources to help support the conversation, because it's such a big one, I might pull some language samples that have to do with employee safety, and that's what my experience has been, that this issue tends to be couched under safety clauses, if, that seems to be where it lives. So I'll have some for us to reference, maybe take a look at.
So June 4th,
Yes, sir.
1 o'clock. I appreciate y'all doing that. We were unable to, the last 2 weeks of school, we just can't pull our administrators out of the school.
No, we understand.
Yeah, that's why whenever
Still want to get out there.
I know, I agree. That's why I reached out and asked if we could do it on the 16th, which is what you originally offered, but the 4th works, and sorry, Deborah, you won't be here for that one, but I know you're not, sorry, you'll be on vacation already. But, yeah, but I do appreciate that, because that makes it much more manageable for everybody to be in their schools at a time of year that we all know is very hectic.
And will you let us know where?
Yeah, as soon as I can find out. I used to say this was great, but it got hot in here, so I don't know about
It's
that.
nice, but it's cool.
It's nice gas. I haven't figured out how to turn that on.
Now you know how to turn it on.
So if it's not here, I will, well, I'll let you know. I'll find out where I'll let Deborah know. Is that okay? Is that okay, Deborah, or do you want me to? All right, folks, is that it? Good? All right, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you all.
June 4th, thank you.
Oh, and next week is Staff Appreciation Week, and